Hello, I'm Ada Hasloecher with the Divorce and Family Mediation Center. And today I want to talk about equitable distribution of assets and debts and what is deemed joint property versus what is deemed separate property. So New York State is an equitable distribution state. And in a nutshell, what that really means is that everything that has been accrued during the marriage is subject to dividing everything in what my couples agree will be a fair and equitable way. And this is a big topic that we discuss in the mediation process. So the one thing that I want to distinguish here is that when we talk about equitable distribution, it really has to do with marital property, joint property. So what is deemed separate property? Because we want to really make the distinction between the two. And it's interesting because before I became a divorce mediator, I really didn't know what the law was about legal protections that we have as a married spouse. For example, I didn't know that when you're married, one spouse cannot disinherit the other spouse. Who knew? Nobody tells you what your legal rights are when you decide to get married. And in fact, when we look at separate property in a mediation, and we're having this very important discussion, we have to make a distinction between what actually is considered separate property. So there are some obvious ones, like any monies that were accrued in a retirement plan, like a 401k or pension before the marriage, is considered separate property and is not part of equitable distribution of the marital portion. And that kind of seems obvious, but maybe not obvious to everybody. But the two others that come up from time to time has to do with inheritances and personal injury awards. Those are considered separate property, even in a marriage, but here's a caveat. As long as those monies were not commingled in any way in a joint account or commingled with joint expenses. So for example, if the wife receives an inheritance from her parents of $100,000 and used some of that money to help pay the mortgage, that money that went to pay the mortgage may not be considered separate property now because she commingled it in a joint asset. Or if they went on vacation with that money, that is also commingled. If it was put in a joint bank account, the moment that that happens, it's very hard to distinguish what was separate and what was joint. So you want to be very careful about that. And it's more nuanced than what I'm explaining here, but I want you to be aware of that. The other thing is a personal injury award. I had received a personal injury monies many years ago. And when I received the money, which ostensibly was to pay my medical expenses and things like that, I put it in a joint bank account. Who knew? I put it in a joint bank account. I did use those money for my medical expenses, but there was money left over from that. And, we use the money for other things. So most people don't realize that when they receive these separate monies for personal injury or for inheritances, it really should be dedicated in a separate bank account specifically for that person. And then if they decide that they want to use those monies for joint expenses, that's fine, but at least you're making a separation here. So everything is crystal clear. So come to my table. Again, these things are much more nuanced than I can get into in a 3-minute video, but I really think it's important to make distinctions between what's separate property and what is joint property. So Ada Hasloecher, Divorce and Family Mediation Center, come to my table and let's talk about it. Thank you for listening.